in page Kuf Gimel, finished discussing the Indian of the way that Sira, the blockage of the Seichel that creates the Gilui. And the last thing, what was the dogma from a question? Only to questioning, you reach a deeper level. Now, how many lines from the bottom? Not exactly. Another example, till now, but example from the Seichel, from the way Seichel works. Now, even the from Tzmicha. Similar thing we find in the concept of planting vegetation. You plant the seed in the ground, because the plant is hidden, contained within the ground, in the earth, that creates the growth. In the but here that we find similar to what we discussed in Seichel. There is the smooth way, there is the not questioning, there's with questioning. It's a similar situation we find in Zriya. There's Zriya and Tzmicha. There's planting seeds for grain, and there's planting seeds for food tree. Zriya betvur v'yirak is gavne. Kinds of planting seeds of tvur, which is grain, v'yirakis, which is vegetables. First of all, that doesn't take that long to grow. That's one thing. On the tea, mashenk and the tea, which is planting fruits, that means you plant a seed that turns into a tree, a fruit tree. That takes much longer. It's much more. It's much more. It's a longer process. But the investment versus the result is much more. It's much better, much richer in the fruit and tree. In Bezriya, he describes it. When it comes, for example, to wheat, what do we plant? A seed of wheat. The wheat itself could have been eaten, and instead we plant. What comes out? When you plant a wheat kernel, what comes out? Also wheat. Same thing. The only difference is that from one kernel of wheat we produce a whole what do you call it? Whole thing, a lot of kernels of wheat. The seeds that we plant are usually not edible. For example, an apple, grape. You plant the seed of an apple. The seed of the apple is not edible. What we plant is the seed, the apple the seed, which is not edible. And it takes a very long time. What is the result? The result is not just similar thing, but a lot of food. Put one kernel of an apple in the ground, and while a few years later, you have a full tree full of fruit. What's the name? Similar situations also Baruchnis. שיש עבוד שפנס על הזמן, שהמשוך מיד בלי שיהיה זמן רב. There's a level of avodas Hashem, the amshocha, the draw, the pulling down of the godly energy to the avodah is immediate. This year's man rab doesn't take a long time. Yes, amshocha b'shir zman, but then there's another type of avodah that the amshocha that comes to it takes a long time. But it's a much higher level. Here's an example. One example he brings is the difference between Kim Mitzvah and Kim Mitzvah. When you make Mitzvah, you draw down immediately Hamshacha, a flow of Elikus directly, immediately. For example, when we put on tefillin, there's an immediate amshacha of Daled Meichen. The Daled Meichen Shalamayla dot Chachma Bina, and Das HaKoil Chesed Gvur. The tzitzis, the union of tzitzis is amshachas lamed beis nesivis chach. Says in Kabbalah that the tzitzis have lamed beis chutin 4 times 8 is 32. So the tzitzis are mamshach lamed beis nesivis chach. Kai gam no cholam mitzvahs. Similar thing happens in each mitzvah. I am shachi beis nesivis mitzvah. When does the amshacha happen? Immediately when you perform the mitzvah. Each day when a person puts on film, immediately experiences it, but experiences it or experiences it or but there's amshach, there's a flaw. That's the Kabbalah tells it. There's amshach right away of this meich. That's why I find lachein k'she'echzer is a mitzvah chasa yom echad chasa levush echad. An expression in Zohar chasa yom echad. And a person misses one day of Kiyum HaMitzvah, he's missing that particular garment. Cannot fix it by making the mitzvah the next day. Each day has its own amshacha that's supposed to be nimshach same day. B'meile, that shows us that this is an immediate effect. So the amshach is missing, but tshuva helps. That is mavur in. I mean, in the beginning of Yiras HaTshuva also it says that what does it say? In the beginning of Yiras HaTshuva talks about how mitzvah sese ovam sese mishav ein ezaz mishamat shemechnele. There is a way to recover to tshuva. Aber mitzvah loises, machine mitzvah loises, the avodah is different. I'm sure it's a of dafka beizirus aloises. It's not the minute you have this opportunity, this that to be nichshol as v'shalom and slices, and you stand by the nisayon. So ain't the dafka beis. Chaliyos shamshach meshar zman. Interesting terminology here. Says it's not a specific act. it's a constant, it's a state of being. Person is always in a state that he's going to stay away from its places. So that means that it's not something that's immediate. And the Hamshach that's nimshach through mitzvahs is a higher level than mitzvahs, which is similar to what he said in the Marshal, that the payers that we get through to netia, to planting a seed of a tree, is a much more success. What is the marker that Leisa says? Ayer says Kamaima, like we learned in a lot of places, cities, Shmim Yutke Shasa Zichim Vavke Ramach. Says in Tikkun Isaiah, it says in Pasuk, Zeshmi la'olam v'zeh zichir l'der v'dor, says the Zayah, says Tikkun Isaiah, Shmi, the word Shmi, with Yutke, is the gematria Shasa, which is Shasa mitzvahs. Zichir with Vavke, is gematria Ramach, which is mitzvahs. What does that show us? Number one, Yutke is higher than Vavke. So that's already a sign, that's already a remez that mitzvahs are higher than mitzvahs, and Shmi is higher than Zichir also. My name and my memory, obviously the name is a higher level than memory. So these two, the concept that Shmi im Yutke b'gematria Shasan and Zichir Vav b'gematria Ramach, that shows us that the Hamshach mitzvahs is a higher Hamshach. It says, כמו שכתוב בליקוטי תורה, למה שכתוב בתורה של השיר, מעביר לשחרר הנדחות שבייס. צריך את המקום בליקוטי תורה של השיר, but the Rebbe usually, I mean, the Rebbe probably is another more precise point. The Rebbe always used to quote from the Maimah in Likuti Torah Pekudei, right in the beginning of Likuti Torah. Pekudei was a longer arich as the mile of the slices of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs, he talks about the asagas hashlila. The mitzvahs you reach higher. So b'meila b'negel Yoneinu, he says that this is the marshal of Zriya and the Tia, Eres and Leises. There's another way to explain the difference between these two types of avodah. There's a difference between tzaddikim and yishorim. What does it say in Pasuk? It says, Ma'amar Chazal, lo yakel lo'ira v'lo yakel l'simcha, v'tzaddikim lo'ira v'yishorim l'simcha, k'mo shekosov, oil zoor l'tzaddik, v'lo l'simcha. Okay. It starts with the Chazal, but it starts with the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, oil zoor l'tzaddik, the tzaddik gets a planted light, oil zoor, when people are yeshorim, they're straight, simcha, they get joy. What's the chiluk? So the Chazal say, tzadikim la'oira, yeshorim l'simcha. What's meant this? Well, what's the deeper meaning here? It says that tzadikim roitzim sheti amshocha miyad. Because there's zohar. So he's medayik in the word zohar. We just said zohar means the concept of planting seeds of zoim, of wheat, of tuvur. So b'meila tzadikim roitzim sheyamshach miyad, v'zeh zoru l'tzadik k'mo yazriya shetzmicha b'li sheyeh zman. So the avodah of tzadikim is in a way of like similar to zriya, which is miyad b'li sheyeh zman. But that taking time. Yishorim lo yichpas lem sheyamshach meshach zman. The regel of Yishorim is shelo yichpas lehem shetiyamshach meshach hazman. Then they don't demand that it should be immediate. They don't mind the hamshacha should take time. Yishorim is higher than tzaddikim. Yishorim, what is Yishorim? Yishorim means straight. What does straight mean? Everything is equal. Sha'elam v'agilu shava etzlo. Al kein lo yichpas lem she'amshach gam b'shir zman, because they're in a madrig. El megillah shavetz lo, mainly they don't mind that it takes time. Aval amshachi madrig gavoy v'nayis yes. But this amshach is from higher level. V'aynu kanal shekol shmisaka b'yisach hakach amshach goes b'yisach. That anything takes longer. Hakach amshach because pnina now yisach. כמו יקנה דעה, לא יססה, וכן בישום שליח בסלם האלם, שהידי זה הגילוי ובחינס ער פנימי ועצמי. So he threw in a whole
Why,
thing.
why is the Helen the Gilui showing at somebody showing?
I think it's a certain number. No, I don't get it. So Shavitzi Hashem Tom, they're higher than it's a higher level of connection. That's all it's saying. It's like it's a type. In other words, tzaddikim here means in a specific context. The tzaddikim is on two types of tzaddikim, I guess. The tzaddikim who want immediate results, So that's obviously both of them are very high madrigas and Avodas Hashem. They're tzaddikim. We're not talking about simple people here, but in that group, I guess there's two. The tzaddikim are that level that they need the gilui. They need gilui likus that they want right away. Zarua. Ishorim are above. Gilui's elam is not tefes makom, but them they're higher than that. Maybe it's similar to what the Alter Rebbe said. Similar to what the Alter Rebbe said that Miriam Hashemay Chavasi Be'oretz. That ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, ich will nicht dein Elam Abba. The one Elam and Gil is equal. Mele, the results take longer, but because it's a higher level. It's not such a clear concept. The idea is, the general idea is understood more or less.
I hear in the name of the Aizu Hamlin,
What?
Tzadik Hashem of Intilim Yudbeis, Tzadik Hashem Tzedok Israel, but Yosho Yechaz von Neimoy.
Yeah.
Tzadik Hashem Tzedok Israel, but Yosho Yechaz von Neimoy.
Maybe that's connected to this chat. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so it's interesting. The whole thing that came into it was I'm not even sure why. If you think about it, this entire in our Maimon we're discussing. Now he goes back to the original concept of the Maimon. I mean, it's all related. So the Maimon this is discussing the in of Hatzor Hakova. That the more withholding, the higher the gilu. So first he brought a dogma from Seichel. Then he brought a dogma from Zriya and Netia. So it sounds, he doesn't articulate it clearly, but it sounds what he's saying is that in Netia the Helam is stronger. Because the Garin, for number one, the Garin is not a Garin of that's Royal Achila. So Zriya is more. Zriya is the type of gilu which doesn't have that so. But mainly the result, it's not such a great gilu. But the real Gilui comes to the Atzor V'Akova. So again, what do we see it in the Tia? Number one, the Garin is not a Lachil. Number two, it takes much longer time. Then he went from this the way he described it in the agricultural world, he went into Avodas Hashem. In Avodas Hashem, we also see these two types. That the harder the work, the longer it takes. In other words, what we're saying is that something that takes longer, it's also a sign of Hatzor V'Akova, something that's being withheld. Something that's fast, it means it's not withheld. The longer it takes, the more it's withheld, the better the results. So he brought our dogma from Avodas Hashem, which says with slices. Then to explain the concept of slices, he brought in another concept, tzaddikim v'yishorim. It's a little bit of a detour, but that's what he's getting at. But now he's going into another. He's already finished with this. He goes into another point. This entire concept, what we just described as Zriya and Tia, by tzaddikim yishorim, and by Esel Leises, he says it's similar thing we find in Golus. Golus Bovel Akshim Shana Golus Bovel. Golus by Slish, not home by Slish, Golus Bovel only took 70 years. The Melech Hakar by Shein Shechosel Bedvor. So what happened later? The Gilead came after the Helm of the Churban by Shein, because it was a very limited. What we call in our language, only 70 years. So the result wasn't perfect. The Bais Sheni missed 5 things. The famous Gemara, there are 5 important items that the Bais Hamikdash Rishon had. The Bais Sheni didn't have it because it came after the goals of only 70 years. Golos Achen Shenim Shazman Rav Mashenken, this current goals, which is being drawn for such a long time. So lost in love, the Bais Shlish, which comes after a very long Golus, which in our language is a very long Hatzor V'Akova, that also is what the results from that is the Gilui of Bais Shlishi, which is the Matzim himself. So that this pasuk, he applies it here to Bais Shlishi, that godly is, where it's greater than Bais Shlishi. Shekosov, and there's another pasuk, Ein le'os al kim zal secha yosam mechakaloi, the famous pasuk in the shiur. There's a madrigat Ein le'os. No eye was seen it. Elikim Zilosech, only the Abish saw it, and then it says, Yas al Machakal. What's Mentos? Aiden Stimoda Tika in Kabbalah language. This is the Madrega that's this Gala Losid, that's Aiden Stimoda Tika, the highest level of the Ati, Stimoda. Prince Atzain Sop, Gala Losid. Yosef Davka the Machakalis. The pasuk says the Machakal, what is the Machakalim? And the Daiglim of the Chokmas. Machakalim is someone who works hard. The Ribuy Alomis Vesterim Davka Losa Kolelim Vester. It's a result of the avoid of Asoras and Vester, which is also sort of similar to the Hatzor. There's a Davka Losid. Cholu, Agil Losa, which goes to the Be'erech, but Dush Yem Shalosh and Samachwavs. And that Samachwav is based on this Maimah Chazal, Yosel Machakal. That Ein Le'os, that doesn't say Yosel Machakal. So what, again, so this is another general example how the Hatzor V'Akova brings a higher Gilu. So the Golus. Going Kol Zehu, so that's what he says. Kol Zehu is summarizing. Shal Yidei HaKova Udavka Gilu. Kol Masha Misaka V'Yesa Gilu, Kol Masha Misaka V'Yesa Gilu B'Yechnes Renal Yes. So that is the idea that we also learned from the comparison of Bais Sheni and Bais Shlishi. Kol Zeyuvon. Now going back to earlier state, to describing the entire Shtalshalos, הגילוי הנמשך מאין סוף לאילומס, זה על ידי הצמצום של אין סוף, להצלק. So the entire system of creation, the entire system of Ishtalshalus also has the same klal, the same, it's built on the same premise, that only to the tzimtzum, only through, you're now on page Kuvdalit, close to the bottom of the page, that to the tzimtzum, we have which is la'atzer, la'akev, function is to stop, block, prevent. That makes the gam that's in stuff any begether klal, kemoiken er kol batzos begether klal. That's in stuff itself. Shemaim begether. And even kol batzos is the mind begether. Come on, that seems to shot. So a cover of this there shenas nimshach hayavagid. So that's a concept he started discussing earlier on page. One second. Who was it? Started discussing right at the beginning. Not in the beginning. He asked the question as Basel should be gilid, but he started discussing it in page Kuf Aleph. It said over there that in order for the shemesh to shine, it has to have a magen, a natek, which is the atzor v'akov. Zeu anechi magen lo. Remember, in the beginning of the Maimer, he asked the question, not asked the question, described, Avinu is a Aoras HaKav. How does Aoras HaKav, that's the Aor of the Ensof in the Shtalshalus, how does that happen to the Mogen? I'm not a Mogen, but they Shibachnes Avom, Shibachnes Gilei HaKav, no, the Gilei HaKav to happen, so it's really a Mogen, but not a Latzalakav. That, in order for that to happen, it has to be first the concept of the magen v'natek, the shield and the prevention, and that in turn creates the gilead, the revelation. Now we go back to the pasuk. What did the pasuk say? Let's go back to page cool. Page Sariktes. He brings the Alter Rebbe. He starts bringing the Alter Rebbe. Shekol ches shakadosh baruch hu yisad l'odom tzarich להיות shfal ruach ma'od, ki kol hakorev v'yesod tzarich להיות shfal ruach v'yesod. That's Katoint. But now, when it comes back to the pasuk here, he says really, what he says two ways. Only one way is based on what we learned till now. So far as based, they find it. What is the meaning of Katointi mikol hachasod? Aleph. The first pshat, ineksiv mi Yaakov Yaakov ki kotnu. It says Yaakov is cotton. Yaakov is limited, which is the atzor v'akov. Why? Liyosef briach min hakotzer lakotzer. Like I mentioned the first time we learned it. He says here pshat and briach min hakotzer lakotzer, which usually is it's almost the opposite of the usual pshat. Usually we say means like it's everywhere. It's everywhere. From end to end. So that's the usual take on that here now in this mind it says the opposite. From one end to another end, which means it's limited. So katoidim kol chasadim, it means that alles chasadim happen only to katointi, to Yaakov's limit, nakotzer lakotzer. So that actually fits. That fits that is a way. The entire Maimer is based on this premise, on this idea that Gilu comes to Helem, to Atzor v'Akova, to Tzimtzum, and the same thing. Chasodim come to Katointi, to limit. But then he says, our base. Then he says in a way the opposite. Because Kodesh shenase kotl v'shofel de Gilu. We bought the Gas HaKodesh in the beginning of the Maimer. What is the lashon? Chesed b'chinas kiros alikim. Kol HaKorah v'yesod says, tzarich shfal ruach. In other words, the gil of the chasadim, that made Yaakov cotton. Now, the first shot is that the cotton is a way to which the chasadim came through, because there's cotton, because there's that tzor cover, that created the chasadim. Now is the opposite. The chasadim, the gilim made them smaller. So then he develops this point. The ine Yaakov oya kola v'dotzvim abirurim. Yaakov's avodah was the bureau of this world, the removal of the the removal of all the concealments of godliness, to be mavar, to elevate the reality that he lived in. And that was the deeper meaning of his avodah b'tzayin lovan. He was elevating tzayin lovan. Zeh bir neshama is the biyah. Tzayin lovan is a remes of neshama is the biyah, like we learned in the Maimah Vayetzek, which is I mashkatsa b'divamascha vayikal Yaakov makar livna in ches, which we learned earlier that neshama is the tzayin, is a remes of neshama is the biyah, because zera adam zera beima, and neshama is the biyah are zera beima. Yaakov's avodah was to elevate them. The gilui, the biurim. In Avom, so he goes more detail. Avom, b'chinas hamshachat zayin l'mayla l'mayla. Avrom's avodah in general was hamshachat l'mayla l'mayla. He was mamshach halikus into this world. Vayikra Hashem Hashem Abeikei Leilam, Chesed. He was achnas hasalachim. That's hamshachat, God, goodness and godliness. Yitzchak b'chinas gvura gbolasoi. Yitzchak's avodah was gvura. What is gvura? Gvura is limit shebe'er ha'olam. It's the limit the hamshachat. Avrom is chesed. Chesed bli gvul. That's why he reached even to Yishmael. So it was no limitation. Yitzchak put a limit, a gbol. We find that the biurim by Yitzchak also chafiras be'eres, but it's not his ultimate avodah. Aval Yaakov ya'ikar avodas bin biurim. Avodah of Yaakov was to take things in this world and to elevate them. Voyel Esek in Lavan ve'Esav. That's why Yaakov he was occupied with dealing with Lavan and Esav. Shekol zeh avodas biur, and that is the avodah of biur. The idea zeh because Yaakov was busy with avodas biur, but is a nimshach lemchnas pnius atzvin himself. Because that the ultimate purpose of creation is biurim. So because Yaakov fulfilled this ultimate purpose, so that caused hamshach of Hatzvus and itself. Mele aidezek katointi miribe gilui. So that gilui that resulted from his avodah biurim, that made them smaller. That katointi shnatzach is shafal b'yesel, like we said before from Geras HaKodesh. It was a very high gilui that creates shiftless. V'ainu, what pshat nasa shafal b'yesel? Shebazen nasa kli yesel ragil. The shiftless is not something that it's not a negative. No, it's a positive thing. It means shenasa kli yesel. It became shafal, it became a higher level of beetle. But mainly is a keli for such a high level of gilu. So that's pshat what the Alter Rebbe says in Geras HaKodesh. Kol hakorov agba l'mayla tzarich shfar rochis l'mata. Says the Alter Rebbe says the lashon we brought in the beginning of the Maimah that kol hakorov yeiser tzarich shfar rochis. So why? So the Rebbe Rashab says pshat only is clear. The beetle, the shuffle yeiser is not like it's like a punishment. It's the opposite. That makes him a keli. Because of such high gilu, how can he be a keli at such high gilu when you have a stronger level of beetle? Shuffle be yeiser. You feel even less. You feel even less ametzius, less of your ego. V'uma sheheder kli yupnes kli. Means the ederaklit means the feeling that you're nobody, the beetle, that itself will is a keli. He brings a lotion. So a similar thing we found, like I said, in the Torah Pekudei, when he discusses the mile of loises. Why to loises we get a higher madrega, because loises is what is lashon a loikli. What is like? Let's say you don't do anything. You're not doing. You're preventing yourself. You're withholding. You're refraining from doing something. So it's not a kli. So because of that, you're able to be a keli to higher madrega. If you're doing something, so the Amshach is limited by your action. Your action has a limit, because every nivel has a limit. But Mashenken and Loises, it's inaction. Inaction means directly I'm bottled, I'm not doing something. So that is a kli for higher gilut, because there's nothing it's not limited to you in your box. So that's the mashal and the concept here that the beetle is a higher kli.
But if there is no Kelly,
what?
If there is no Kelly, so how can it be Hamshach? Hamshach is a Kelly.
The Keli. The Keli is the not Keli. The header, the beetle is the Keli. There's a type of Keli. The regular Keli means that you have a vessel. You have a certain talent. You have a certain way of getting something, and he gets it. Mashenken. That's when a keli is limited, but when you bottle, so you become can be a dealer of something which is not limited by your restrictions. So that is a shaloi kli or kli. The non being, that is the keli of mekabel, something higher.
I just have a question on it. I'm sorry, the question from page before. It says the more cover, the better light, or the stronger light. Does it explain why? What's the reason for that?
That was all point of the whole Maimah, that to say that Hatzova cover, that allows that. Remember, with the questions, the more questions you have, the deeper you're gonna get. That's the whole point. That's the whole point that he's making. That Hatzova cover, that creates the gili. Like we learned earlier on the mashal, like I said, from the West mashal.
But understand that's understandable. But so why is it the longer the cover?
The longer means it's a more of a cover. When something gets longer, it means it's hidden even more. When something takes longer to produce, it's a stronger symptom. It's a stronger concealment. So that eventually brings out a higher level. The more you conceal, the deeper the result in the end. That's the idea that he's saying. All right.
Thank you.
He says, just like Eder Kli is a keli of keli is the kli, just like Loises. Keno Basaras Halamas. Similar in our situation, Asaras Halamas, that's itself is the keli. So that's the meaning of קטונתי מכל החסדים, שמפני גיל העיר שאם שעל ידי עשור הסהסת המעקב, שיוי העיר שלא ידי הצמצום, כאן כמו שכל בעצמו זכולו, because to the avoida. He reached such a high level of גילוי, of the העיר שלא ידי הצמצום, כמו שכל בעצמו זכולו, על ידי קטונתי, מבחינת שיפלס בייסר, so that itself turned them into a keli to the side. Okay, so that's one step. Like I pointed out, this seems superficially, seems like at this point we're not talking anymore about the Atzova cover. Now he's talking about beetle. There's a second shot in Katointi. It's a new point. Then he continues the pasuk says Katoinim kol chasadim kol emes. So the meaning of chasadim we explained. What is the meaning of emes? What is the meaning of emes? Emes means, he says, Yishloima, הנה ידוע, דהמשוחס הקו מבחינת מלכוס דאינסוף. וזה מבחינת חיצוניוס הקו, ופנימיוס הקו נמשך מבחינת תפארת הנעלה. That's another whole sugya that I think somebody pointed out lately that this line he just said now it's almost like it's a chiddush of the Rebbe Rashab, that it says sometimes in Chassidus we find two explanations. One is that the kav, the Makar kav is in Malchus Dein Sof. Sometimes it says that the source of the source is in Tiferes Dein Sof, which is Tiferes Dein Sof. It's a madrega which is in the spheres Lifnei Tzimtzum, the Tiferes and Malchus. So the Rashab says that he says there's Pnimius Akav and Chitzonius. The two madregas in Kav, Pnimius and Chitzonius. In Kav Gufa, the Kav means the Aros Akav in Ishtalshalos, there's Pnimius and Chitzonius. Says the Rebbe Rashab here that there's a Chasodim and Emes. That Chitzonius Akav. What?
It's Tiferes HaMalchus or Tiferes
Malchus
HaMalchus?
Dein Sof and Tiferes HaNelam. In there's Esas Spheres Agnuzes Lifnei Tzimtzum, and there's Tiferes and there's Malchus. So Pnimius Akav is from Tiferes, and Chitzonius Akav is from Malchus. Zein Chasodim ve'emes shebeis ha'madrega shebekav. So Mele Yaakov gets not only Chasodim, which is Malchus Dein Sof, but also Emes. I assume that Emes is first. So he says it very bekitzer here. That the Rebbe always used to say also in the Haggadah, just in the Haggadah, so they also bought from the Rebbe Rashab. Chvoida is Malchus Dein Sof, Ba'atzma is Tiferes Dein Sof. It's two madregas in the Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, which is the shiur Makar Akav, which in a way it means that the shiur of the kav, which is Nimshach Lachar Tzimtzum. But in that shiur guf, the kav has two stages, two aspects to it: the chitzonius and the pnimius. In other places in Chassidus, for example, I think so. Well, that like chitzonius akav is the chitzonius haratzon, the savas ha'elamis, and pnimius akav that is Torah mitzvahs. Sometimes it says that. So that's Tiferes and Malchus. So he says the Yaakov to his avodah he get both. Tiferes, not only Malchus, but also Tiferes. And then he goes further. He says the next pasuk. What's the lashon? K'toiti mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes asher asisa sabtecha ki b'makli avartis hayarden hazeh v'ata isa l'shtei machlis. That's the lashon l'shnei machlis. That's the lashon in pasuk. Now he's going to give it the pshat of Chassidus. What's the hemshach? Hakam avayo inyan. So first is that. So there's a bir inyan in the next page, in the next line. What is makil? Makil u'pchinas amshoch. Makil means amshoch, a stick. Where you have a stick, it's like it's a long stick. So there's from top to bottom, it's amshoch. That's a much of amshoch. Makli, but it says makli with the yud. What does that mean? Makil yud. Pchinas nekuda. It's not stam a makil. It's a makil which is mamshach from the nekuda. Ein pchinas nekuda ha'atzmus. Shezeh ha'oyer k'mo shekol ba'atzmus. She'etzem ha'oyer pchinas nekuda. The etzem ha'oyer, the essence of the oil, the source of the oil is in a state of nekuda, a point. So that we learned in the beginning of this sefer, the hemshech of Rosh Hashanah, min ha'meitza ka'osiko Over there, he talks also the Meitzah. Meitzah is like a narrow, which means the Yud, the Nekuda of the Etzem Ha'oil. וזהו, כי במקלי שאם שבחינס עצמוס האויר.
שזהו האויר כמו שהוא כולל בעצמוס, he means עצמוס ממש, או בעצמוס האויר.
The oil is called עצמוס, עצמוס המויר לכאורה. The עצם oil is called עצמוס המויר. פשטוס לכאורה, that's the moir. So that's one remes. Then he said, "Zeo ki b'makli zeo ki b'makli she'im shachnes atzmos." Ubezeo v'ati sayarden. Now he goes to the Indian of yarden. So remember, we learned yarden is a very interesting thing, but Chassidus does to the yarden. So the Gemara, we open the Gemara then. The Gemara says, "Yarden shenoitl mizel noisel lezek ma'amar azal." So we learned the Gemara in what was it? Metzia, I think. It talks about some situation that the person, the river flooded. Someone else's river. There was a river in the city, and the river flooded, and the water of the river took some items from Reuven and transferred to Shimon. The water moved the items from one place to another. So there's all shiur over there, and when they get to Iyush, whether it's Kaine. That's the Gemara. And the Gemara says Loshen Yarden. Rashi says Yarden lav dafke. Yarden is just an example of a river. That's what Rashi says. But Chassidus, it's possible that before Chassidus also they have Chassidus. It's in Kotetera also in Kotetera Massive. It talks about Ever Yarden. So Chassidus takes this actually maybe Kabbalah already. Takes this interesting expression of the Mishnah, Yarden shenoitel mizev noisan lezeh, and puts different meaning in it. The madreg of Yarden, the word Yarden represents a certain mode of movement from one to the other. Noitel mizev noisan lezeh. What's meant us? So what does it mean to us? Who prius morgen anal? So Yarden as Maramis now is taking us back to the Maimer itself, to what we learned till now.
What's the connection to Yarden? Noitel v'Neisan. What's the connection to Yarden, to the word?
So I just said, didn't I just say that? Okay, so
No,
repeat. The Mishnah says Yarden. The Mishnah says Yarden. The Yarden, the river, moved the items. It flooded, and it moved items from Reuven to Shimon, right? That's what the Mishnah says. So the style is what we do with that's the lashon of the Mishnah. Mishnah Gemara comes. See this, and Rashi says the Yarden lav dafke. Yarden means just the example of a river. That's what the Gemara says. But the Chassidus finds a remes that whenever we say that Yarden, the concept of Yarden, the function of a Yarden is shenoitel mizev noisan lezeh. The function of Yarden is to transfer something from one state to different state, from one mode.
So my question is, why Yarden? This is Rashi said lav dafke, or the way that Chassidus is explaining why Yarden. What's the word Yarden?
It doesn't. You want to know if it's Muhammad in the word Yarden? I don't know if it's Muhammad. The Remes is in the Lashon Mishnah. The Mishnah says the Lashon Yarden. So that itself is a remes. That is the remes. It's not. I don't think it's Muhammad in the word yard in itself. Muhammad in the lashon of the Mishnah, the Gemara. Yeah, shenoitel again. Yard. Sorry. The Metzia, yeah. So where's the Metzia? Metzia from Beis Medal. You know what? Rashi says like this. Chen sha'ar no'ot v'tan ezeh al yad ha'yarden o yesh. That's what Rashi says. Let's see if anybody else says something else. I don't see a different shot. That's what it says. But okay, actually now I see it. Okay, see now that see it, if you want that bit. It says in Yerushalmi, it says differently. That is the Babel. Okay, so maybe I was wrong. The Yerushalmi Taka connects it to the Yarden. Pirush Yerushalmi linear Gedusha Sa'aretz. That's the Yarden. שהירדן המסיק בין הציסול לארץ העמים, אחד מהגבולס הירדן, I'm reading now שיטה מקובצת במציע, דף חבייז המדל. That the Yarden is the border between חוץ לארץ והציסול. כדי כסיב הירדן הגבול, משום כמה אילו נוטל הירדן מארץ העמי ואיך בגבול הארץ, הרי מה שנוסן ואיך בארץ סוף דרשת הארץ, אם נמשך אצל הארץ, נוסן לארץ העם, מחוץ לארץ, זה חושב. So basically what he says here, okay, it's the Ramban, but it's okay, so I guess the Chassidus doesn't, the Gemara S, he says the Gemara in Erchen S take. If it's Yarden, it lists the no. Let the Mishnah say no. I just say Yarden. So it says the Ramban that it's taka bedafka, because a Yerushalmi actually. That because the Yarden is, there's all other Rishonim, I see the rituals, other Rishonim. We just looked at Rashi. But other Rishonim also say because the Yarden is the border, so the Yarden could has the ability, let's say the Yarden gets narrow, so Eretz gets smaller. It can move. It can move property from Eretz to Eretz. That's what I'm reading here in Ramban. It's interesting that that says let's say the river, according to this to Ramban, if the river Yarden just changes its course, it goes inside, it turns more outside, so it takes away from Chutz La'aretz and makes it so bigger, or the opposite. If it changes course in the opposite direction, it goes into Eretz Yisrael, so it makes Eretz Yisrael smaller, which is quite a chiddush, but that's what the Ramban says. Okay, so that fits more. Chassidus explains it. The Yarden has that capacity to move from one to the other. But the way he says it here, because Mogen really he says, what is the Yarden? That's the Mogen, the Mogen Vanatik, the shield. We spoke earlier. What is the unique quality that the shield has, that it can take the etzem, the oil, the moil, and be megala to the oil. That's noitel mizeh and noitel mizeh. Okay, I'm gonna maybe revisit this concept tomorrow again. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.